Okay, AP Statistics, we are going to talk more about outliers and what they mean and some influential points. What does that mean? So, in the last video, I ended by mentioning that anything that lies outside of the pattern of the overall pattern of the data is going to be an outlier. And I showed you a little picture here of what an outlier would look like. So let's look at some more of this. Let's look at what an influential point is. What is an influential point? And how is it different from an outlier? So the thing you need to remember is that you can have a point and it can be an outlier or influential, or it can be both. So how do you determine what it is and what it's not? And keep in mind, if you're reading your book and looking through your chapters on this particular unit, the book also calls influential points leverage points. So keep that in mind. So if I'm talking about, is it influential? Well, it's considered influential if it has an impact on the regression line. So in other words, if it impacts it so much that the slope or the y-intercept or both move enough away from the original line. So what would that look like? Well, let's say we've got x and y here, and I know I'm labeling all of my x and y axes with just x and y, but when we use a real example, we will write context here. We won't just use x and y. So let's say we've got some points here. Well, let's say I put a point out here. Does that point lie outside of the overall pattern of the data? Yes, it does. But is it still in line with the data? Well, if you'll look at this, yes, it is still in line with the data. That means that although this point is an ordered pair, an outlier, wow, Amy. So this is an outlier, but is it influential? Not necessarily, because it's still in line with the data. So it's not influential because it doesn't change. My handwriting is just ridiculous. Okay, so it's not influential because the slope and the y-intercept won't change, because it's going to actually strengthen the relationship, because it's going to lengthen that line right there. So it's not going to change the relationship. It's actually going to strengthen this particular relationship. Okay, so what if I have a point out here? Is that an outlier? Absolutely. It's outside of the trend of the data. So it is an outlier. Is this one influential? This one is influential. See how it's lower than the rest of the data? So what's it going to do? It's going to pull that line lower. Now it is going to have a great impact on the slope and the y-intercept. So this one is influential. So that just kind of gives you an idea of something that can be an outlier and not influential, and a point that can be an outlier and is influential. It's only influential if it changes your slope and changes your y-intercept. In other words, it affects the least squares regression line, which is what we're going to talk about on our next video.